What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Pick Six Podcast, CBS Sports Daily NFL Podcast. I'm Brinson. I'm your host. If you're listening to the podcast, it is Friday, March 20. I don't even know how these dates are getting me confused. If you're watching on YouTube, it is Thursday, March 24th.
If you're listening, the earliest you're listening to this is Friday.
Okay. So that's how it's going to go, because we have made a change here at the Pick Six Podcast where we are live on YouTube every day at 1 o'clock. Let's say you take your lunch break at 1 o'clock Eastern and you want to hang out with us. We have a chat. It's live. You can chat with us depending on who it is. And today it's Chris Trapasso and Josh Alberts. What's up, boys?
How's it going?
It's going well. We're going to do some draft needs today. Very excited for it. If you were watching on YouTube, smash that like button. Make sure and subscribe, rate, and review. You want to hit the alert button in case we have. I don't think we'll have any more emergency podcasts this offseason, but who knows? Man, Tyreek Hill traded. Didn't see that one coming.
It happened so fast yesterday. It happened so fast.
I know. It was very bizarre how that happened. What'd you say, Devo?
We could get an emergency for Josh's former quarterback or QB2 right now.
Oh, that's true. We'll get a Baker. No, Baker's getting cut or traded. Like they'll trade him. They signed Jacoby Brissett to be.
I feel like he's going to end up in Seattle. That's kind of how I see it playing out.
Yeah.
The two biggest supporters of Baker Mayfield seem to be John Dorsey, the general manager of the Browns at the time he was picked. Number 1 overall, he's now in Detroit. And then Alonzo Highsmith was a member of that front office as well, and he's with Seattle as it so happens. So that's why I'm led to believe that it's probably going to end up being the Seahawks when it's all said and done.
That definitely checks out. As Dominic points out in the chat, to be fair, it's more like 105 every day. Yeah, it's I was doing another podcast. By the way, we'll also be live at 3:05 p.m. today as well on Thursday afternoon. That podcast will be in the feed too. We're adjusting to this new life of live on YouTube every day at 1 o'clock. So what we'll probably do is Debo will start telling me it's live at 12:55, and then we'll start at 1. If you're listening on the podcast, leave a 5-star review with a question on Apple. We could use it for a future mailbag. I also want to share a little cheat code for keeping tabs of March Madness, and that's the CBS Sports mobile app. It's not only your gateway to watching every tournament game, the best for lightning quick college basketball scoreboards, updating brackets, expert picks, and the latest news on all the action for the men's and women's tournament. The app is free. Just search CBS Sports in your app store. And if you're like me, it'll soon be your go-to sports app for everything. Also, you can favorite the games, you get alerts when the game starts in case you forget that the Sweet 16 is on or something like that. We're going to be doing team needs over the next few weeks, right? Which means that you guys are probably going to see more of me than you would prefer, but that's what it is. The AFC draft, the AFC free agency grade show will be at 3 p.m. today and also released in the feed as well. We're going to do AFC East and NFC East draft needs today. Apropos, considering that the Miami Dolphins just traded for Tyreek Hill, meaning they are probably not in the market for a wide receiver. Do you think the Chiefs now, or the Chiefs and the Packers gonna? I know we'll get to that later, but the Chiefs and the Packers might be fighting in the later rounds to get wide receivers, right?
Yeah, I think so. Even if they don't do it in round 1 or with these picks that they got in the Tyreek Hill trade, they have to address that position. I think certainly Patrick Mahomes can elevate your team and is still going to be a top tier quarterback, but Tyreek Hill was kind of the gas pedal in that offense. And I think to not have him all of a sudden, you're not going to probably have as many 5-yard passes that turn into 70-yard touchdowns, like that crushing touchdown against my Bills in the divisional round. So yeah, I think the Chiefs and Packers, two teams with the quarterbacks, but certainly have a huge wide receiver need at this point.
No, not that it's lingering or anything, right? So, that crushing, soul-stabbing touchdown from Tyreek Hill.
I've seen from yesterday, it was like that touchdown with a minute to go against the Bills was on loop. My dad called me about it. He's like, I'm sick of seeing this. I was already moved past it. And now it's like this trade out of nowhere happens. Tyreek Hill getting traded seemed preposterous a week ago or even a day ago. And then it's like, oh, let's show some more of the fourth quarter and overtime in that win against the Bills. It's tough
scene. Maybe the Jets, Josh, could be interested in potentially drafting a wide receiver. They were in on Tyreek Hill and ultimately fell short. If you are looking at the Jets and you see that they have number 4 and number 10 overall in the first round, by the way, this draft is going to be so weird because maybe you guys know, if not, don't worry about it. We can count it up like while Josh is talking, but the number of teams that have 2 picks in the first round or more, or the number of teams that don't have a first round pick. Like there's like 8 or 9 teams that don't even need to show up on Thursday.
Yeah, I think we are at 9 teams that do not have a pick in the first round. So it's going to be unheard of. I mean, there's, I think, 7 teams that control nearly half of the first round. It's absurd. But the Jets, they own 2 of those picks at number 4 and number 10 overall. The fact that they were in the mix for Tyreek Hill suggests that they want some wide receiver help. But the fact that they were also in the mix suggests that maybe they had their eyes on other positions and they were hoping to fill that wide receiver hole through a trade as they tried to do. So wide receiver is back on the board for that team. I think you could see them go offensive tackle. There's been a lot of buzz to suggest that. I would like to see them go cornerback, and I wouldn't mind see them taking an edge rusher. So it's a team with a lot of very easy needs, easily identifiable. So as I'm looking at this team, a couple of prospects that I really like, and I'm sure Traps has kind of focused in on these guys as well, but Cincinnati cornerback Ahmad Gardner, who has great length, man coverage cornerback, and then Kayvon Thibodeau, the pass rusher from Oregon, who seems to fall later in mock drafts each and every day. I still think he would be a fantastic fit for New York as they continue to build that defensive front with Quinnen Williams, and then a healthy Carl Lawson on the other side.
What say you, Traps, on that the top end of the draft for the Jets?
Yeah, just to look to see where they are. To be at 4 and 10, like Josh said, I think it's got to be Sauce Gardner at 4. It just seems like that's going to be the prospect that's available when they pick after those first 3 selections shake out. And then at number 10, I think the guy that I've mocked the most to the Jets is Garrett Wilson. I mean, to have Elijah Moore, he flashed last season as a rookie, had a nice rapport with Zach Wilson, even Mike White, while Zach Wilson was out. But to add another bouncy, springy type wide receiver that is good after the catch, runs good routes, I think at number 10, maybe be the first wide receiver off the board. That makes a lot of sense to me. I'm not huge on Mekhi Becton. If they went offensive tackle, I certainly would not hate that because Zach Wilson got sacked a bunch last year. And it is a good wide receiver class. They have a bunch of picks in round 2 and round 3. But I think Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson would make the most sense to me. If Kayvon Thibodeau's there and they love him, I would be okay with that. And I would get it because Robert Saleh is a defensive-minded coach. But in the AFC, I mean, yeah, you can say, hey, like, let's get a lot of pass rushers to disrupt these quarterbacks. But you also have to score a lot of points in this completely loaded AFC. So I would like them to go maybe corner at 4, Sauce Gardner, and then Garrett Wilson, or maybe Chris Olave at number 10.
Okay, so Sauce Gardner, I need to look at the market for this, but I want to say that Sauce Gardner is like a pretty heavy favorite now to be the first cornerback drafted. Has he?
Yeah.
I mean, I know that the general consensus is that he's sort of maybe a higher floor and potentially similar ceiling to Derek Stingley. So
yeah.
it would be surprising if Stingley was the first cornerback at this point, right?
Yeah, at this point, I think so, just because of his injury history over the past couple of years. I mean, Stingley, when healthy, has shown that he's proven to be that top cornerback talent. But the fact that he has not been on the field that much over the past 2 years, and Ahmad Gardner has not only been on the field, but been uber productive, just leads me to believe that he's probably going to be the first cornerback taken.
So, and I just while we're doing this, I like to incorporate the draft odds where we have them. Sauce Gardner over under 8.5. Under meaning he's taken in the first 8 picks. Over means it's 9 or later. Under is -161, so it's really juiced. But that's a stone cold lock, right?
I think so. I don't see how he gets past the Jets, the Giants, all those teams inside the top 8. I think the Jets, just because they have such a clear-cut need, they signed Marcus Williams in free agency, but really have not really addressed the corner spot. And that was the biggest issue, I think, as much as the offensive line last year, was how bad the secondary was. I would definitely, even with it being -170 or whatever you said, I would definitely go under 8.5. That seems like a lock to me.
I will say one thing that could throw a wrench into all of this is where are the quarterbacks going to go?
Yeah.
We might talk about a couple of those destinations, but although we do not see any of these guys as maybe top 10 talents, speaking for myself, I'm not going to speak for Traps, but I don't see any of these guys as top 10 talents. But there's almost certainly going to be one taken in the top 10 because that's just how it's played out over the past couple of decades in the NFL.
Yeah. And you look at the teams that would potentially want a quarterback that early, like the Lions had the second overall pick and then nothing else until 32, which is great. But Malik Willis, if they like Malik Willis, he's not falling to 32. The Panthers have the sixth overall pick. You'd love to trade down and get Kenny Pickett or Malik Willis or whoever you like. Or maybe Desmond Ridder, who they just going to every pro day, but don't go to Desmond Ritter's pro day. I mean, okay, whatever. Anyway,
what is that?
I know. Although maybe it's like an obvious, like a reverse smokescreen that they're like, oh, yeah, we don't like Desmond Ridder, as far as you know. They don't have a second round pick either. So it's, if they want a quarterback, they got to take him at 6. And so I think those things are just kind of interesting to kind of hash out. I'm probably going to bet Gardner. 161 is a lot, but it feels like 8.5 is a pretty good spot to be in. Plus, if you're the Jets, they're not going to take a quarterback. And if you want a cornerback, don't you sort of have to go take him at 4? Like you can't be like, all right, we'll take Thibodeau at 4, and then we'll hope that Sauce falls to us at 10. I mean, that's because he's probably not going to.
Yeah, let me jump in here. I think Sauce Gardner could be. I mean, we don't really see a ton of teams moving up for corners, although it has happened a few times recently. Sauce Gardner seems like the type of corner that you would do that for a lot of the reasons that Josh pointed out, because of his man coverage ability, how big he is, he tested well. And then all the other corners, like Derek Stingley, an enigma because of the injury. We don't know if he's even fully healthy. Andrew Booth from Clemson didn't work out at the Clemson Pro Day. The 2 Washington corners, Trent McDuffie and Kyler Gordon, ran a lot slower and were a lot smaller than people expected. So it kind of feels like Sauce Gardner is kind of alone in this top tier. And yes, if there is a team, maybe just outside the top 10 that sees Gardner falling a little bit past maybe the Jets at 4, he's the type that has the kind of physical profile and had kind of a super clean college season that to me indicates a team would say, hey, let's trade up a few spots and get Sauce Gardner in our secondary.
Yeah. And just to further the quarterback point too, Pete Prisco's mock draft, which came out right before the Tyreek Hill trade, or maybe the day before, he has Sauce going 10 to the Jets, but that's because they took Thibodeau at 4. And
I would flip that.
Yeah, I agree with that. But to the quarterback point, he had Pickett going to the Panthers and Malik Willis going to the Falcons at 6 and 8. And the Giants, who would be the problem for Sauce, went with Icky at 5 and Kyle Hamilton, which, I mean, that's not an unrealistic scenario.
No.
But I do agree with you. If you're looking at the Giants and, I guess the Giants could take Thibodeau there. I'm just sort of thinking through the because I'm going to do my mock in the next 3 or 4 days. My first one. Thrilled.
I've done 25, I think. So is Josh.
At this point, you guys are just like meet more. I just sort of wonder. I think if I were the Jets, a cornerback, you don't see cornerbacks going to the top 5 very often. But I would rather run the risk of Thibodeau dropping to 10, just because of the teams ahead of me versus Sauce Gardner dropping to 10.
Yes.
Yeah, and here's another point to that as well. There's more edge rushers in this class than there are cornerbacks. So You may not get Kayvon Thibodeau, but maybe you get Georgia's Trayvon Walker. Maybe you get Florida State's Jermaine Johnson, Purdue's George Karlaftis. There's going to be options available if you're dead set on taking an edge rusher and you miss out on Thibodeau. Whereas if you miss out on Gardner, your options are pretty much Stingley, or you wait maybe until your second round pick to address that position.
Okay. I dig it. I guess you sort of answered it, but day 2 prospects to target. That's Josh sort of answered it. So we'll just move on. The Jets ample draft picks as they attempt to rebuild. Can't reload if you were never loaded in the first place. I guess the Jets went to 2 championship games in 2009 and 2010. The Patriots, they're picking at 21 in the first round. Traps, when you look at this team, what are the biggest needs and who might be a prospect fit there?
Okay, I think they really need wide receiver. I just cannot see Bill Belichick picking another receiver in the first round. N'Keal Harry was a disaster way back in the day. Chad Jackson was a first-round pick by Bill Belichick. Also
Was he
not
a
very
first round? I
good.
think he was what? Are you a second rounder?
Was he? I thought he was like the
I
last
could be
pick in the
wrong.
first round. Anyway, he was
Yeah.
picked super early. Bill Belichick
It was
had
like the third
the
or fourth pick of the second round, but I'm pretty sure that N'Keal Harry is the first ever wide receiver he took in the first round.
maybe you're right. Maybe you're
And
right.
like,
But
like to your point, like people, no one will let him forget about it because he's coming over Debo Samuel, AJ Brown, and DK Metcalf, which is just horrific scouting.
now it certainly could be that obviously Tom Brady covered up a lot of flaws on offense for like 20 years for the Patriots, but it just feels like Bill Belichick would rather go the bargain bin, undrafted free agent, Julian Edelman type than go with a premium pick at wide receiver. Although that is what they need. Someone like Chris Olave would do a lot for Mac Jones. So maybe just late in his career, Bill Belichick kind of bucks his own trend and goes Chris Olave. I think they need linebacker. Someone like Devin Lloyd kind of feels like that bigger, longer, rangier linebacker that the Patriots have kind of gravitated toward in the past. But I think at corner, after losing J.C. Jackson, Kaiir Elam from Florida makes the most sense in terms of a scheme fit. That we kind of talked that it's Sauce Gardner, then a big gap, and no one really knows who the second corner is going to be off the board. Kaiir Elam played at Florida, pretty good production, tested a lot better than people expected, and has that legitimate on an island man coverage ability. That when you look at Trent McDuffie and Kyler Gordon from Washington, they played a ton of zone. Andrew Booth, a lot of zone. So it wouldn't surprise me if Bill Belichick says, hey, we lost our top corner in J.C. Jackson. Let's get someone that's super talented and long and also has played a lot of man coverage in the SEC in Kaiir Elam.
Yeah, I'll say, traditionally I would have agreed with you in terms of what we can expect from Bill Belichick. But over the past year, we've seen him kind of buck a couple of trends that he has historically stuck to. And that is he swung big in free agency last year. They moved on from a fullback this year. So maybe that's, a precursor to some change to his offense. So I'm starting to think maybe he's changing his colors here with some of the moves that he's made. But I did have both of those names that you mentioned on my list of potential first-round picks as well. I think Kaiir Elam is a fantastic fit. Chris Olave is the other name that I had written down in the first. As you're talking about day two picks, maybe you look at Chattanooga interior offensive lineman Cole Strange because they did trade Shaq Mason to Tampa Bay. Kirby Joseph, safety from Illinois, is a very smart safety that I think Bill Belichick is, will be able to trust from day one. Somebody that can stay in and perform, immediately for him. So those are two guys that I'm looking at as potential day two fits for that organization.
I dig it. The Buffalo Bills. Unless there's anything else you guys want to talk about with the Patriots. By the way, if Belichick takes a wide receiver in the first round, I know he doesn't give a crap what anybody thinks about him, but like,
it better work out.
yeah. Like if you take Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson's awesome, and Olave's not, and I mean that would be kind of surprising that it's not going to be a great look. The Buffalo Bills picking number 25 in the first round. Traps, have you gotten used to the Bills picking late in the first round at this point?
It's weird. I mean, it was always
Breach isn't going to know what to do on Thursday
at 31 for the Bengals. Yeah, seriously. Yeah. So for me, it was always like the Bills were in like purgatory forever. They picking between like 10 and 16 or 18 for like what seemed like my whole life. So to pick like 30 last year and then 25 this year is definitely strange. I did look it up. Chad Jackson was the 36th pick in that draft. So it seemed like he was a first rounder for some reason, but I was wrong on that. The Bills need corner. I have been the biggest driver of the pick a wide receiver bandwagon, even after signing Jamison Crowder. I just think they have to get younger at that position. Jameson Williams, if he's there, I think would make a ton of sense. I don't know if they would ultimately do it, but being that they're in the position that they are, they're the favorites on the betting market to win the Super Bowl next year. If Jameson Williams like can't play at 100% until like November, feels like given their roster makeup, especially in the wide receiver room, the Bills would be okay with that. Maybe more so than any other team. I mean, maybe outside the Chiefs, but now they have such a glaring need after trading Tyreek Hill. They need corner too. I mean, not only did they lose Levi Wallace, but to have Tre'Davious White tearing his ACL, on Thanksgiving weekend. He may not be 100% to start the season, and they play a lot of zone. So those Washington corners that I mentioned earlier, Trent McDuffie, Kyler Gordon. I love Andrew Booth from Clemson. I think he's super twitchy. The ball skills are tremendous. I think he could be really good in Sean McDermott's defense. And then offensive guard is still a little bit of a need. I mean, Ryan Bates is signing a restricted free agent offer sheet, which doesn't happen very often. The Bills have 5 days to match that. If they don't, then suddenly they have a pretty good line with Roger Saffold, Deion Dawkins, Mitch Morse. But then the other guard spot is kind of vacant at this point. You can't really rely on Cody Ford anymore. So one of those three positions, wide receiver, corner, or guard in round one. If Zion Johnson from Boston College was there, I would be fine with that selection. It just feels like he's going to go a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I can see how this is going to go. It's whoever gets to talk first is going to steal the other one's prospects that fit that team, because I had written down.
I was just thinking, I guess we'll just alternate here. That way, because if you go first, you're like, hey, here's the best fit. And then the other guy's like, well, screw you, bro. That's fine. Like, I think that's the best fit too.
Yeah, so I had Trent McDuffie and I had Zion Johnson as the two names that I had written down. Obviously,
and look, by the way, if you do have overlapping ones, there's nothing wrong. Make sure and mention that before offering up anybody else, just because I think, if you have multiple opinions who believe that these guys are good fits, that only serves to sort of bolster the idea that could be a good prospect for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably more of a kiss of death than anything, but
that's right.
Quarterback, offensive guard, those were the two positions that I kind of honed in on with the Bills pick. Traps went through everything, obviously. As we get into day two fits, I looked at Dylan Parham from Memphis as a guy that could possibly slide into that interior offensive line. And then the other guy that I had was Martin Emerson, a cornerback from Mississippi State. So same wavelength, both targeting the same positions. You get one in the first round, maybe you come back and get the other position on day two.
I'll throw in two more names quick because we got to do more time on the Bills because it's me on this podcast. Sure. Roger McCreery from Auburn in round 2.
Super Bowl.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to really milk this as long as I can with the Bills being Super Bowl favorites. Roger McCreery, the cornerback from Auburn, to me has first round film. He's got like super short arms, under 30 inches, which is almost unheard of. And he ran 4.50 at the combine. I think people thought he was a little faster, but you watch him even against Jamar Chase in 2019, the Alabama receivers the past couple of years, always put up a really good fight. I think, like Josh said, if they go wide receiver or guard in the round 1, corner in round 2 will be a gigantic need on day 2. And the other player I have to mention, because he's probably my favorite, like under the radar prospect in the entire class, Sky Moore from Western Michigan. I'm a huge fan of his. The Bills actually, despite having such a good offense last 2 years, finished with the second fewest yards after the catch per reception last year. Only the Dolphins had a lower average yards after the catch per reception. A little bit of it was scheme based, but with Cole Beasley and even Stephon Diggs, who's pretty agile, they just were not creating a lot of extra yardage for Josh Allen. Sky Moore is really good in that area. And that's, even if they don't go Sky Moore, I think as the Bills come up in the first round, second and third, we should kind of lean toward receivers that can create with the ball in their hands, because I think that's the one kind of layer of the Bills offense that needs to improve.
Dig it. The Miami Dolphins, suddenly much, much less exciting when it comes to talking about the draft than they were 24 hours ago. And by the way, we talked about this on the, I think we talked about this in the podcast. Yeah, I think, Jordan, me, DeJohnny, and Sully talked about this on the pod. But like, to your point, Traps, that I've never seen a trade unfold that way, where there's an initial report that's like Tyreek Hill is a candidate to be moved, and you're like, oh well, this is a little spicy. This is going to really ruin the next 48 hours. Like we're gonna have to.
It was done in 45 minutes.
Yeah, and then it was like Schefter's like, this is going to happen soon. It was like, it's either the Dolphins or the Jets. And it's like, and it's the Dolphins. It's like, whoa, what? I was like spinning out of control here. It was pretty wild. But the Dolphins now have no first round pick as a result. They gave up because they really got out of hand. So they give up basically 2 first round picks for Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, which is not insane, but the number 29 went to Jalen Waddle, and then the Eagles picked up the other one last offseason. So I guess I'll just generally ask you, Josh, and you're sort of getting screwed here because of the prospect fits. You can't use any first rounders. What do you think the Dolphins' strategy should be, and what do they need help with?
Yeah, so I'm still looking at the interior of both sides of the ball. I'm looking at defensive tackle, linebacker on defense. I'm looking at center on the other side of the ball. They signed Teron Armstead in addition to trading for Tyreek Hill. So you're kind of starting to see the pieces come together. They've also signed Connor Williams in free agency. So there's some pieces to that offensive line coming together. Now they need a center and they need some pieces on the other side of the ball. So in the day 2 prospects that I'm kind of looking at, Matthew Butler, a defensive tackle from Tennessee, a guy that just jumps off the snap. First step quickness is amazing. He's in the backfield before you know it. And then Nebraska center Cam Jurgens, who has his own beef jerky line, as we found out at the NFL Combine, was a media darling. Everybody loved him, and he just blew up the testing in Indianapolis. And his tape is fantastic. I mean, he's a former tight end. He's still developing. But when you look at the traits that he has athletically, he's a guy that has high upside. And I think somebody is going to take a chance on him on day 2. So those are 2 guys that I'm looking at. And it's not even day 2 for Miami because they don't even pick until, I think, like 86 or something like that. So
102, I think. I just looked.
102, that's right.
Yeah,
That's
because they give up their first and second round pick
correct.
for Tyreek Hill. Yeah.
Yep.
Hey, let me ask you this. Do you guys think it's not, I guess it's not, it's sort of draft centric, but what did you think about the compensation for Tyreek Hill? Because my initial thought was that it was kind of light for Tyreek. I know Mike Mccreery works at Sportsline for the pod, but like he's putting like a bunch of Chiefs fans are like, this is a great deal for us. We got capital back and we got to unload Tyreek Hill. I'm like, what? Huh? What are you talking about?
I think it's probably a fair deal because you see some people saying, oh, it was great for the Dolphins. You see some people saying, oh, it was great for the Chiefs. So the reality is it's probably somewhere in the middle. I tend to favor the side of not having to pay $28 million a year to a 28-year-old wide receiver. At this stage in his career, going from Patrick Mahomes to Tua Tagovailoa is a bit of a gamble. And I personally would not have taken it, but, they're a team that sees all these other AFC teams making moves, and they felt like they had to do something rash themselves.
Oh, NFL teams. Boy, you just don't care, do you? I mean, they just don't care. It's like, we got to go in. We're the Dolphins. It's like, maybe just take it down a notch. All right. Anything else on the Dolphins?
Well, I will say the scoreboard's 1-1 because Josh just stole Cam Jurgens, my pick for the Dolphins on day 2. But I'll throw one back at Josh. What about Luke Fortner from your Kentucky program at the center spot? I mean, looking at Connor Williams, Teron Armstead, that's great. Robert Hunt's been a pretty serviceable right guard. But I still think to have Michael Dieter and Liam Eichenberg at center and right tackle is a little bit concerning, especially given that Tua is not that great of an athlete. He's not an improviser that's going to make crazy throws on the run. Luke Fortner started a bunch of games at Kentucky. Josh can tell you a lot more about him than I can. And I think linebacker is still kind of a need. Troy Anderson from Montana State. I know Josh was on him early. I got around to his film. This guy was a quarterback, like a scrambling quarterback that I believe won his conference's like offensive player of the year, then immediately flipped to linebacker and won defensive player of the year. I think the Dolphins do still need some athleticism in that front seven, even though they have Jerome Baker, they do have some pieces, but if they don't go interior offensive line with someone like Cam Jurgens or Luke Fortner, I think someone like Troy Anderson to add more range and coverage ability to that linebacker group, especially playing in this wide open AFC with all the weapons and all the quarterbacks, would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, Fortner's a very smart guy. He's got a background studying engineering. He's got a couple degrees to his name. Former guard. He's played center. He's got a lot of experience in the SEC. So a guy that's got multi-positional flexibility for a team that drafts him. One thing that you kind of noted on there is the prospects that are making a transition from one position to another. And there's a lot of those converts in this draft class. You're talking about Armani Rogers, former quarterback at Ohio, and he's projected to move to tight end. Jelani Woods is another guy that made a transition. You've got Bernard Raymond at Central Michigan, a former tight end. Cam Jurgens, I already mentioned. You talked about Troy Anderson. Jared Bernhardt from Ferris State is a former quarterback that's going to be making a transition at the next level. So lots of these guys that have played other positions at the collegiate level and are going to be trying something new at the next level. It's going to be very interesting to see how some of these teams view prospects that have zero tape whatsoever at some of the positions that they're projected to play in the NFL.
All right. Great stuff on the AFC East. We have another division to take care of. I mean, very timely, too. You guys are clipping it right along very nicely. Let's take a break. And when we come back, we'll do the NFC East. The Cowboys draft. We'll tell you next. So, we'll go with the Giants first. The NFC East is, I mean, you talk about a division that's going to be discussed heavily early on in the draft. I mean, would they have? But God, are we talking about like with the Jets plus the Giants plus the Eagles? Are we talking about like 8 of the first 12 picks here, or something like that? It's crazy because the Eagles
the NFC East has 7 picks in the first round.
Oh man, Debo,
that's a lot.
Debo, of course, Debo did NFC East first. Got to talk about the Eagles, but we'll start with the Giants. And look at the Giants with the number 5 and number 7 overall picks in the first round. Acquired one of those via the trade with the Bears, where the Bears came up to get Justin Fields, and then the Giants moved down and got Kadarius Toney, but only because the Eagles jumped them, leapfrogged them to steal Devontae Smith. Whole thing back there. Josh, what fits? What needs do the Giants have, and who might be a fit for them with 5 and 7?
It's a very similar conversation to what we had with the Jets. You're looking at cornerback, you're looking at edge rusher, you're looking at possibly offensive tackle, opposite of Andrew Thomas. New York has been a team that has been commonly linked to offensive tackle throughout the pre-draft process. They did go out and they signed Mark Glowinski, so you added some interior help there, but to possibly pursue an Evan Neal from Alabama or Charles Cross from Mississippi State or your guy Ike Ekwonu from NC State, maybe those guys are options. We've already talked about the cornerback and the edge rusher options, but one thing that's very interesting with the Giants, and you guys kind of alluded to this earlier, is the strategy that goes into it. Yeah. Because you've got number 5, you've got number 7, there's one pick in between, and that's held by the Carolina Panthers. So if you're looking at what Carolina may need at number 6 overall, and you're torn between a couple of players, take the player you don't think Carolina is going to take at number 6 overall, and then your guy's probably still going to be sitting on the board for you at number 7. So there's going to be a little gamesmanship as New York makes their first pick with the new regime.
Well, let's not forget too that this regime is not Dave Gettleman, which means I guess Dave Gettleman, they got the pick by trading down, but it took an absolute absurd haul for Dave Gettleman to finally agree to trade down for the first time in his history as a general manager. Joe Schoen, Joe Shane, would be a lot more likely to trade down, given that the Giants have to think that they're, a little, they're not. I mean, they could contend for a playoff berth in a really weak NFC if things really break their way. Daniel Jones has a big season, et cetera. But I do think the Giants look at this like, we could use more assets. Like there'd be nothing wrong with getting more assets. And if a team likes Kenny Pickett or likes Malik Willis, and either of those guys falls to 5, pretty good spot for them to be able to trade out, because the Carolina Panthers are such an obvious landing spot for quarterback, particularly if Jimmy G stays in Seattle and Baker goes to, if Jimmy G stays in San Francisco and Baker goes to Seattle, and if you're the Giants, you still have that pick at 7. So you're more than willing to let somebody snipe the Panthers, trade down. You're going to get a guy in 2 picks anyway. What concern traps? What like if you're Joe Shane and you're not trading down? I mean, are you planning on the Panthers going with quarterback? Or are you planning on, or do you think or do you say, all right, the Panthers are acting like they're going to go quarterback. They're clearly going to take, Evan Neal or Icky or whoever's there, or, we'll take the lineman and then we'll gamble on Kyle Hamilton at 7. I mean, what I was curious the strategy as well there.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly would be exploring all trade down options at 5, because I don't know what team would want to trade up. Maybe the Seahawks to get Malik Willis from 9 to 5 wouldn't be a huge haul. But if I couldn't trade down, to me, it needs to be Kayvon Thibodeau at 5 and or any of the offensive tackles, whether it's Icky, whether it's Charles Cross, or if Evan Neal is there. I think, wide receiver, they have the 36th pick at the top of the second round. The Giants could add more for Daniel Jones or to me, who's going to be the next quarterback in 2023, a rookie. You can do that there with a lot more value than probably what you would get at a receiver position at 5 or 7. So it's assuming Aiden Hutchinson is getting close to being a lock to go number 1 overall. I think Kayvon Thibodeau would make a lot of sense. They need more edge rusher help, and you need a quality right tackle, like Josh said, opposite Andrew Thomas. I like Kyle Hamilton. I like Derek Stingley, but it just feels like those two positions, and specifically Kayvon Thibodeau, is the type of edge rusher that Joe Schoen, having spent his time in Buffalo, they just picked Gregory Rousseau, who's kind of like a physical specimen, but not completely polished. I think he will gravitate toward that type of player. If they pick Kyle Hamilton, I won't think it's the worst selection in round 1, but to me, it's got to be edge rusher, offensive tackle with those first 2 picks.
All right. Anything else with the Giants? The Giants are fascinating because we don't know. I mean, we sort of know how Joe Schoen might operate because we've seen, like, they've acted very, Joe Schoen and Brian Dable have acted very similarly to Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott. So, like, move together, bring guys that sign cheap offensive linemen. So I think that sort of informs our thinking. Quarterbacks, somebody in the chat, Jalen LeGrant, said that I'm telling y'all, Giants are sneaky quarterback pick. I'm telling y'all.
That would be an awesome smokescreen if they go this whole time and no one's really brought up the fact that they could pick a quarterback. I would pick a quarterback. I would pick Malik Willis. If I was Brian Dable, having spent time with Josh Allen the last 4 years, I would say, hey, yep, we're going to pick Daniel Jones. And then just at 5, right in front of the Panthers, crush the soul of Matt Rule and pick Malik Willis right in front of him.
That would be a tough seed. And then within the Panthers, just panic pick Kenny Pickett, obviously.
Yes. One thing, I view the Giants as a team at 36 overall in round 2 that would make a lot of sense for David Ojabo, that if he falls because of the Achilles, just first year of a new regime, they can wait half a season, a full season for someone and say, hey, look, just get healthy for 2023. We want you to be, you and Azeez Ojulari be our 2 young, speedy, bendy edge rushers. That seems like a team that would be interested in making that selection kind of at the beginning of this quasi-rebuilding process.
All right.
One thing I've got, and Traps, this is for you, so I don't want to catch you mid-drink there, but, with Joe Schoen coming over to New York, I mean, is there anything that you would tell Giants fans about how Brandon Beane has handled the draft, any positional value tips or anything that you
I already mentioned it, that with Josh Allen, Tremaine Edmonds, Gregory Rousseau, and Spencer Brown, the Bills definitely during the Brandon Beane, Joe Schoen era were willing to gamble on like raw, freaky athletes that were kind of boom or bust. Like I was not a fan of the Gregory Rousseau pick because I thought they should have been more in win now mode last season. But Rousseau was all about upside. So was Josh Allen. So was Tremaine Edmonds, being 19 years old when he was picked or whatever it was. So that's like the one overarching thing that I would say that beyond him understanding that, hey, you got to have a good offensive line in front of your quarterback, good receivers. It's just that they were willing to gamble on those boomer bust prospects that had high upside.
That is. So who fits the mold?
That's why I said Kayvon Thibodeau, because I don't think he's crazy polished. But if there's someone where you're like, hey, in 3 years, he could be Myles Garrett 2.0, it's Kayvon Thibodeau. So that's why I think Joe Schoen would kind of lean in that direction.
Wouldn't Icky and Evan Neal also probably qualify? Not that they're necessarily busty, but just I probably shouldn't call
Evan
busty.
Neal too. Evan Neal would be the guy, just being a little bigger than Icky.
Prospect.
But not busty in any definition of that term. But yeah, I would say Evan Neal and Kayvon Thibodeau would fit that mold. Maybe Icky too, because he's such a good athlete. But that's definitely something that the Bills liked relatively early in the draft over the last 3 or 4 years.
And I guess they haven't really. I mean, obviously they got Poyer and Hyde through free agency, so I don't know how much that informs us of like their possible interest in Kyle Hamilton. Because it may be a situation where they say like this guy could be cheap. He can be like the back end. Because I mean, clearly safety is important to the or is important to the current Bills regime. I mean, I would assume typically speaking, when you have Joe Schoen, came up from under Brandon Beane. I mean, they're going to operate in pretty similar fashion. Like you're going to, he'll have different ideas, of course, and different methods, but typically speaking, you're going to operate in something close. So I just sort of wonder. I think that safety question is intriguing, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, do they view that position so importantly that they're willing to invest a top 10 pick in Kyle Hamilton and be able to let him become, whatever Poyer and Hyde are, or do they feel like they want to have veteran help there?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to peg. I certainly think that Joe Schoen understands the importance of not only having two good safeties, but Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde literally play both positions. They're not one of them is a free safety. They play strong safety. They do everything. That's what Kyle Hamilton can bring to your defense. But like you mentioned, Jordan Poyer was a low-level free agent signing who was a 7th-round pick. Micah Hyde was a 5th-round pick. There also is a school of thought that Joe Schoen would say, hey, look, it's more of the scheme. Let's just plug in, like you said, veterans or maybe later round picks that kind of fit a specific role as opposed to getting that blue chip guy inside the top 10.
Okay. Interesting discussion. These, I mean, I hope you guys are ready to talk about for the next 6 weeks, talk about on radio hits in print on podcasts, talk about 5 teams. Because that's
New York football teams. Yeah.
The Giants, the Jets, the Eagles. Oh my God, the usual suspects are always picking up top because they're terrible. Speaking of which, the Commanders picking number 11 in the first round. I see here that we have listed Traps quarterback as a possible need. I don't disagree with that. I mean, they have a guy they don't have a quarterback on their roster. Oh, that's the wrong button. What was that? I'm gonna play that again. What was that? Oh, it's a stupid Bengals theme song. Anyway. I'll dunk on myself. Go Tar Heels. Tar Heels need to not win this weekend. Or Friday night, I guess. All right, so what do you think? Realistically, they're not taking a quarterback at 11. We can say they need a quarterback all we want, right? Josh made a face.
I don't think so.
Would they take Malik Willis and let him sit behind Carson Wentz?
I mean, Josh? I don't think it's out of the question whatsoever. Okay. I think they're a very desperate team. I think that was very obvious based on the trade for Carson Wentz. Based on the timing, it was a pretty poor decision. And I know Debo would probably argue with that, but I wouldn't have traded for Carson Wentz when they did personally. They could have gotten a probably equal or better option later for less draft compensation and less money. And maybe I would have taken a shot on one of these quarterbacks, but I might have just punted and taken a quarterback next year as well. So I think I don't think it's out of the question that they take a quarterback. And Malik Willis, you look at what Ron Rivera had in Carolina. I mean, Malik Willis, you never know.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can. Hey, look, if you can put Malik Willis behind Carson Wentz, and then you have two mobile quarterbacks who need to refine their arm strength, their accuracy, and their arm strength, and cut down on possible mistakes. Yeah, I mean, you got perfect combination.
I think it actually would be par for the course for the Commanders, and I hope EK is not listening to this to trade as much as
this podcast a year and a half ago. Don't worry about it.
To trade as much as they did for Carson Wentz and still give him and honor his huge contract that he got with the Colts, and then pick a quarterback right in front of him. And they had the big press conference where he's wearing the burgundy suit with the yellow shirt under it. And then be like, oh yeah, a month later, we're picking a quarterback. That to me would align with what we've seen happen with that organization. I think this has to be wide receiver. For as much as I agree with Josh, I would not have hitched my wagon to Carson Wentz, whether it be Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave. It seems like the value fits here. At pick number 11, we have offensive guard listed and linebacker listed as a team need. I don't really know if there's anyone available. Maybe Nakobe Dean, but they just picked Jamin Davis in last year's first round. So just pick a wide receiver here to finally give Terry McLaurin a running mate and just hope he can elevate Carson Wentz enough to, maybe 8 or 9 wins, which similar to a few years ago in the NFC East, that could ultimately win this division.
Here's my one pushback with you've already got this sunk cost in a quarterback
Carson Wentz
point that I've heard so often. And it's the same that applies to Carolina. But if you fix the quarterback position, no one's going to care if you gave up a 2nd-round pick, a 3rd-round pick. Just get it fixed. Arizona did that.
Best example is the Seattle Seahawks. Well, before, they paid a ton of money to Matt Flynn, and nobody flinched once. Yeah, because they got Russell Wilson.
Arizona. I mean, Josh Rosen to Kyler Murray. You're going to take some heat in the moment, but if it works out, who cares?
Yeah. If you believe Malik Willis can be a special franchise altering prospect, and he's there at 11, you have to take him. Even if you traded a first round pick for Carson Wentz. The Rose and Kyler Murray example is even better than the example that I thought was the best. The madness continues. Don't miss a moment of the action on CBS, TBS, TNT, and True TV. Download the March Madness Live app to watch every game, anywhere, anytime, live. Sweet 16 Elite 8 coming up. Make sure you are on that app so you can watch it anywhere, anytime. The Eagles, Josh. We didn't really do a day 2 prospect for the Commanders. I don't care about the Commanders. I'm over them. See, but it does seem like 11 is kind of a. Like I really am over this team. Like I don't care about this team at all because of this stupid name. Like I like WFT, and now it's
Me too.
I do too.
But like it does feel like 11 is where it starts to get a little no man's landy.
It does.
Maybe. I mean, if we do see 2 quarterbacks in the top 10, then suddenly the door is creaked open a little bit. But
that's
true. That's certainly a possibility. There could be a little bit of a drop off at that point. Day 2 prospects that we might consider: Auburn's Roger McCreery, the cornerback that Traps talked about earlier. Penn State safety Jaquan Brisker. Really rangy players, made a lot of plays on the ball over the past couple of years. So 2 guys that could possibly be in the mix for Washington on day 2.
Okay. Eagles, Josh, have 3 picks, 15, 16, and 19. Debo's gonna be a busy little bee on middle of that first round. Well, what do you see their needs as? And I mean, how Howie Roseman attacks this will be really interesting too, because we talked about this a little bit earlier in the week. Some people, or Debo mentioned this, like some Eagles fans, they want them to trade up and go get somebody, but it's like, if you trade up, you might have to give, like, you don't want to trade in I wouldn't want to trade in the top 10 in this particular draft to give up 2 first rounders. Like I want to sit back. I feel like you can borderline change the direction of your franchise with 3 top 20 picks in a draft that is structured this way.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you've got 3 darts, throw it on the board, hope you get 3 bullseyes. That's what you're hoping to come away with. In my mock draft this morning, I had them taking Devontae Wyatt, the defensive tackle from Georgia. And I believe I'm fairly certain it was an edge rusher. I think it was Florida State's Jermaine Johnson. And I know they just picked up Hassan Reddick, but you're talking about a couple of guys that could come in and be, the future Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox of that defense. I think when you look at this roster, if you can kind of replace some of those aged assets and have a building, a bridge to the future, I think that's an enviable outcome for this Philadelphia team. And then you look at a couple other positions of need: linebacker, wide receiver. Both of those are unorthodox when you typically talk about Philadelphia, because as it has been pointed out by numerous Eagles fans over the past couple of years, they don't take linebackers in the first round. They just don't value them in that capacity. But I think they've finally broken they've reached their breaking point, and they may actually consider a linebacker in the first round. So you're talking about Devin Lloyd from Utah and Nakobe Dean from Georgia. And then wide receiver, are you going to go back to the wide receiver well after taking 2 in the first round in recent years? I think they probably could. I don't know if they should, just based on the way the offense is structured. Maybe I would wait until day 2, but those are the primary needs that I look at for this team. And then cornerback, safety as well.
So for me, the Eagles are, we were talking about turning points. The Commanders at number 11. Does that kind of where the, first round gets a little hazy? With having those 3 selections, 15, 16, and 19, it seems like that's around where Derek Stingley is ultimately going to go. I think that would be a tremendous fit for them. But it's interesting because if the Eagles pass on Derek Stingley 3 times, I think that would raise a huge red flag to the teams picking at 20 and beyond, that initially would be so happy and ecstatic that, hey, Derek Stingley's still available. We can't believe it. This was a guy that was mocked inside the top 5 until he got injured. I think Derek Stingley, Andrew Booth, the Washington corners that we've talked about at length, any of the edge rushers. I'm a little lower on Jermaine Johnson than most people, but it does seem like he is going to be, a top half of the first round selection. I'm fine even with Josh Sweat there on that defensive line for the Eagles to go in that direction. And I agree with Josh. I would not pick a wide receiver. Not that Jalen Reagor's been amazing. Devontae Smith had an encouraging rookie season, but just wait in this draft. 2nd or 3rd round, pick a wide receiver there to add for Jalen Hurts. I really am leaning toward corner. And I think Lewis Seen from Georgia, because of the combine that he had, like jumped 40 inches, 11-foot broad jump, very hard hitter, but also good in coverage. Seems like he would make a lot of sense for that Eagles defense as well. It wasn't really that good of a secondary last year. And for as much as I'm for them trying to build around Jalen Hurts, I would actually like them to go more defense, like Josh mentioned in his mock in the first round with these 3 picks.
I dig it. Debo, do you want to weigh in on your thoughts here on the Eagles chatter here?
Yeah, I want a linebacker, someone in the secondary, and then I would probably go with a receiver with that 3rd pick, depending on how things shake out. I would not be against that. My whole thing, like, they've never had 3 first-round picks. So if it was 1 first-round pick, I'm not going wide receiver again. But with 3 there, if one of the top guys is available at 15, 16, or 19, I'd go for that and then go back to the well in the later rounds. So I am not against a receiver. I get Josh's reasoning for the edge and defensive line, but that's probably a little bit lower down my list now because of that Reddick signing. But wouldn't it be completely upset if someone fell in their lap there?
Well, that's under the assumption they're going to sign Tyrann Mathieu. I can't even say it anymore without hearing breach. Tyrann Mathieu and Patrick Peterson, of course.
I was on this I was on a podcast that will be out like next week or something like that, but it's like not a CBS podcast, and like I was being asked about free agency, and I almost hit the button because I was like, but then then I was like, oh wait, that joke won't land. And I was almost like, Tyrann Mathieu. I almost said it. I just call him Honey Badger because it screwed me up.
Tyrann Mathieu.
Like it's a problem. So I just say Honey Badger.
Yeah, Traps, I'd be extremely upset if 3 times the Eagles passed on Stingley and he was there. Maybe they would have a reason for it, but that would cause a complete uproar.
Indeed.
Yeah,
okay.
Philly Sports Radio would be pretty awesome the next day.
It's worth it for the Philly Sports Radio. Anytime you can get an absolute meltdown in Philadelphia, I am here for it. Moving on. The Dallas Cowboys, our final team in this show, picking number 24 in the first round. Traps, what do you see as the Cowboys team needs, and who could be a good fit for them at 24?
Defensive line, especially after what happened with Randy Gregory. Either of the Georgia guys, Devontae Wyatt, who Josh said earlier for the Eagles, he would make a lot of sense at 24. George Karlaftis from Purdue, Josh's guy, who I think that's kind of where he feels like he'll ultimately go and be maybe the 4th or the 5th edge rusher off the board. Very pro ready. And I have a question for you, Will. Like, where is Jordan Davis going to go? Like, where do the odds, like, I haven't checked recently because it's like after the combine, everyone's like, this is a top 10 pick, top 15, because he tested so well. But then, like, every week that I do these mocks, I'm like, where is he going to go? Baltimore at 14, but they feel like they have bigger needs. It almost has felt like Jordan Davis's buzz is kind of worn off a little bit. So if the Cowboys wanted to add some more beef and just, athleticism, I would be fine actually with Jordan Davis here. Although I would typically say and advocate for picking a nose tackle outside of the first round. If he goes here to the Cowboys, a playoff team that needs defensive tackle, I'd be okay with it.
So let me see if I can find Davis. I don't know if he has a draft. I don't know if he has an over under that.
He's very hard to peg.
Well, and that's probably why the sports books are slow playing the crap. I think they got blistered in the last 2 years on these draft props. They're sort of slow playing it, like in terms of getting him out. And I'm just looking over it.
Like he's not going to the Chargers at 17. They signed a bunch of defensive tackles in free agency. That Saints, Philly, probably not after re-signing Fletcher Cox.
I don't know though.
Feels like there's a buzz for Jordan Davis.
Philly with those 3 picks,
it
would make sense, especially if you think Fletcher Cox is a one and done at this point.
True.
Like you got those 3 picks there. You can Jordan Davis is just a dude. Like you hate to call him a unicorn because he's so big. But he is. He doesn't seem like a unicorn type. It's like he seems more like a giant
Sasquatch.
Sasquatch. There you go. That's perfect. That's exactly what I was looking for. I think Belichick was asked about him at the Georgia Pro Day. It was like, he's not falling. So one of those coaches was asked about him on a good team. Was it Belichick?
I don't know. I didn't hear it.
Oh, no. You know what it was? It was Mike Tomlin, I think. Mike Tomlin was asked about some prospect recently. It was like,
that would make sense. I've seen a lot of Mike Tomlin at pro days over the last couple of days, so it probably
Mike Tomlin's he's been
making the rounds, and he's got a smile every single day. Everybody's trying to associate that with an individual prospect. I think he's just having fun with it all.
Oh yeah,
how much do you guys think for pro days that it's these coaches and GMs just getting together, standing around, and like that's where they do a lot of what we're doing, trying to figure out who's going to go where, as opposed to like watching and taking ample notes on a player. It's all just to gossip, right? That's what it is.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's all they're doing is chatting it up. So Tomlin was asked about Jordan Davis by I think it's a local like Pittsburgh. Oh no, it was the SEC on CBS guy. So it was the ESPN guy. I can't recognize who that is though. And he was like, "You're like, what do you think about Jordan Davis?" He's like, "I'm in the Jordan Davis camp regardless." And then said, "Well, do you think we could see Davis in a Steelers uniform?" And he said, "I doubt it. He may have hugged Goodell by then." And the way he said it was like, because I remember seeing the clip, and you're like, "Oh, like in other words, the Steelers would take Jordan Davis in a heartbeat if he was there." So I think top 20 pick, probably top 15 pick. Debo, would you want the Eagles to draft Jordan Davis at 15? You may have said that, and I just didn't listen.
No, it wasn't on my list, but I would definitely support that.
Yeah. I just think he's he's not Aaron Donald, obviously. He's a different dude. Right. We think he can play 3 downs in the NFL level unless teams are just running complete no huddle. And really nobody can do that.
Fletcher Cox will not be around for the next 4 years. He might, like you said, might not be around for the next 2. So yeah.
Yeah. And at the very least, if you fashion yourself a playoff caliber team, if you're the Eagles, you can keep Fletcher Cox healthy and fresh by rotating in Jordan Davis there. Shoot, play him side by side and just good luck.
I think Houston is a sleeper too with a second first round pick now.
Okay. What what's their second?
13 from Cleveland.
God, Cleveland had the 13th pick.
Mm-hmm.
Man, rough season for the Browns. I mean, if just anecdotally, I would not have thought 13. I would have thought like 17 or something. Okay. Any day 2 picks for the Cowboys? Did we already cover that? My head's spinning. I don't know what's going on.
Cowboys, I like Myjai Sanders for them. He kind of reminds me of Randy Gregory, that he's this taller, bendier, lightweight edge rusher. He just showed up at the Cincinnati Pro Day back like close to 250 after being 228 at the combine. Apparently he was sick the week in Indianapolis. I think the food's good in Indianapolis, so I don't know what happened with Myjai Sanders. But if they were so hard-pressed to re-sign Randy Gregory, he was kind of their reclamation project. Myjai Sanders would make a lot of sense. Cameron Thomas, another one from San Diego State, if they want to address the edge rusher spot opposite DeMarcus Lawrence, who's getting up there in age. And then linebacker, even though they re-signed Leighton Vander Esch, was only a 1-year deal, someone with a lot of athleticism and range. Christian Harris from Alabama, I think, would make a lot of sense for them. And maybe, they sprinkle in wide receiver after losing Amari Cooper and Cedric Wilson in free agency and via a trade.
Yeah, I'll just run through a list real quick. Traps kind of touched on a few of them in the first round. I had George Karlaftis, who, again, it just feels like that's probably the range he's going to go. Nakobe Dean, the linebacker from Georgia, I think would be a great pairing with Micah Parsons there, because Parsons is, quick twitch. He's going to shoot gaps. He's going to get in the backfield. Nakobe Dean, on the other hand, is a guy that, has a lot of quick twitch nature, but he's also a guy that's willing to do the dirty work. He's going to take on blocks and do the stuff that maybe Micah Parsons would not. So I think they would be a great pairing. And then when you get into day 2 prospects, I had Sam Williams, an edge rusher from Ole Miss. He's got a lot of ability. I struggle with his inconsistency and some of the off-field concerns, but Dallas has not strayed from those types in the past. And then Jalen Tolbert, you lose Cedric Wilson, you lose Amari Cooper. Michael Gallup is coming back from an injury. So suddenly you look at that wide receiver room, and even after signing James Washington, you're saying maybe they need a little bit more in there. So Jalen Tolbert from South Alabama is
I love Tolbert's a stud. Like
he's similar.
He's going to go round 2.
Yeah, similar mold to Amari Cooper, kind of the bigger body type guys. So, maybe that's an option for them on day 2.
And I want to just look really quick at Michael Gallup's contract, because Yeah, there's an out after 2 years, basically, like an easy out where they just have $6 million in dead cap space. Like he's going to be on that team for 2 years, and they structured it because they wanted to have a low cap hit this year. But it would make a lot of sense to spend a second or third round pick on a guy like Jalen Tolbert. And Tolbert, I think I agree with you, Traps. Tolbert's a round 2 guy, worst case, day 2 guy, and you grab him. And all of a sudden, you give him 2 years to develop, and then you can move on from Michael Gallup, and you have CD on a big extension and Tolbert on the rookie deal. That's actually a pretty ideal scenario. All right, we're gonna try and sneak this podcast in under. It's not gonna happen. I can't get out in 3 seconds. Plus, there's like an ad that'll be inserted anyway, so it's just over an hour. But that's not a bad pace for 2 full divisions and a robust, busty conversation about the NFL draft. Make sure you're reading CBSSports.com. The NFL draft coverage. Traps and Josh and of course Ryan Wilson do a fantastic job with it. At Chris Trapasso and at Edward CBS, or is that Trapasso CBS? Did I get it right?
Yeah, you got it right first time.
There you go. All right, follow him on Twitter. Smash the like button. Thanks for doing this. Sorry you have to see so much of my face this time of year, but you guys are fun to talk to, and it was a good time. For Traps and Edwards, I'm Brinson. We will see you guys later.